Hi. Hi, Joe. Welcome. We've got myself, Genevieve, Felicity and Janine all here, and we wanted to do a bit of a summary chat of some of the fantastic info that you shared with everyone in the Ready Together group the other day. So welcome. And what we wanted to do today is just focus on some of the stuff that came up in the group about what people can do when they've had a baby and they're thinking about when it's safe to return to exercise. So we're hoping that's what we could kick off with today.
Absolutely, with pleasure.
So first of all, I'll just introduce you for everyone.
Thank you.
You're from the Physiotherapy Clinic.
That's right.
Which is an amazing service, and one of the things that the Physiotherapy Clinic does is run a course for people who are preparing for birth called Born Ready. Is that right?
That's
right. Do you
right.
want to tell us a bit about it, and we'll kick off there?
Oh, sure. So the clinic, I suppose, has been running for a very long time. We've got clinics in Bondi Junction and in Cammeray and down in Caringbah. So we've got a great team, and we work both on the normal musculoskeletal system, and we're all women's health physios as well, so coordinating those couple of specialties. And as part of that, over the many years, we started to see women through their pregnancies and then, of course, after their deliveries, and noticed that there was probably more information that we could offer to women to perhaps assist them have perhaps a smoother birth. So we put together a course. It's a 4-hour course, and run by a couple of us at the physio clinic. And yeah, we just talk through how to look after your body during pregnancy, after birth, and everything in between. Awesome. With the hope to help.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so needed. So one of the kind of the main question that seemed to come up in the group the other day was, when is it safe to return to exercise? And I know there's a lot in that, but I thought we could do a quick rundown for people.
Sure. Yeah. So there's one single point to make there, and it's that it's different for everybody, and the timing will be 100% different for everybody. And there's lots of variables that we consider when we're assessing someone's body to determine A, what type of exercise will be best for them, and B, the timing of that.
Okay.
So for example, if I had just had a baby, my individual birth, the events or the what happens during that birth is going to influence the timing of when I could return to work. I return to exercise.
Yeah, it can do, definitely. There's zero hard and fast rules on that, Felicity. So I couldn't tell you that just because you had a cesarean section, listen, you're going to be fine. By 6 weeks, go and do whatever you like. And the same is true for vaginal. So if you had a really smooth vaginal delivery, I still couldn't just make any judgment based on your delivery. Obviously, there's some variables in a delivery that are flags, as you guys would all know. So if someone's presenting to us already symptomatic, or they can tell us a few variables about their delivery, like length of second stage or trauma, emergency Caesars, etc. Then there's variables, but certainly no hard and fast rules on that.
Okay.
And what would you say are the safest exercises to return to?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because I suppose right now not everybody's got access to physio to get there. What everyone sort of likes to do, a 6-week check in Physioland as well, to answer that question. But I would say, obviously, getting out and walking is fine. You be a little bit careful with your load. So if you're pushing prams up and down hills, you might need to be a little bit careful with that and offload the pram to somebody else. Other than that, walking's fine. Swimming's usually so fine. Once you've stopped bleeding, swimming is fine. Stationary bike riding is usually fine because you're seated. Yeah. So there's less load going down through the areas that we're worried about, which are your pelvis and your abdominal wall. And things like gentle yoga, so gentle hatha style yoga, and very gentle Pilates. Pilates is a bit tricky because there's such a variation of a theme, but generally if it's physio-led Pilates, for example, you can pretty much know you're in safe hands. So that would be what I would say.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
And I think, oh, sorry, you go.
And I was just going to ask about abdominal separation, because that is something that comes up a lot that women will
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
And so how to know that it is an issue for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. We love it in our clinic. We've written a whole course for physios on abdominal separation because it's so influential actually on two variables that are crucial. One, how a woman feels about her body. And two, how a woman's body is functioning because of an abdominal wall separation. And both variables are valid. So basically what you can do, so if you're listening out there, any move that you're doing, any task, any exercise where you feel like your abdominal wall is getting pushed out, or there's like a sense of force outwards or even a peak, sometimes you'll see a dome through the center. There you're making your abdominal separation if you have one much worse. So that goes for pregnancy too. And so whatever you're doing is too hard for your system and please stop. So that you might notice it in Pilates exercises, for example. You might notice it just when you're lifting your baby out of the cot, things like that. Know that that means things are too difficult. And in order to assess how, if you do have a separation, Felicity, it's a bit tricky because the assessment actually is quite detailed because we're thinking a lot about the tissue that you're feeling. But if a woman was to just place her fingers down the center of her tummy, you're feeling the piece of tissue down there called the linea alba, which is actually the piece of connective tissue that does start to separate, lengthen, and become a little bit floppy through the center. So if you can push your hands right in through the middle and you can feel like it's deep, then you might start thinking, oh, maybe I should be concerned about this. Yeah,
that's a really good tip. Are there any things people can do? Because one of the things I suppose you can't get away from is lifting the pram into the car or the capsule. Obviously, you said earlier, like try and get someone else to do it. But if no one else is there a way of physically doing that that's better? Or?
Yes, probably. You can change the ergonomics in the sense that most people would probably already know. Bring the pram right up close to the boot. Yeah. Collapse it down as much as you can. Bend down and get it up so that you're not lifting from way over here to here. Yeah.
So it's about that movement. It's about loading and moving kind of thing.
And minimizing the trajectory of the movement. So just a little, instead of I'm lifting it right over near the, end of the car into the boot, wheel it right up near the boot and get it in. And then other than that, it won't hurt to try your best to engage your core. And this concept is a bit like the pelvic floor I was talking about the other day. It's tricky to prescribe that when you don't actually know what people are doing. But in that scenario, it's almost doesn't matter. It almost is like, okay, I just want a pelvic floor connection, the best that you can do. Yeah. A gentle pulling in of your belly. So if you were to imagine you're lifting your pelvic up and your belly in towards your spine a little bit, 20% lift here, 20% in here, then you're probably going to do better for that lift than nothing at all.
Okay.
So a little bit up, little bit in and lift.
Good tip for everybody, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I think that kind of the last thing I was wondering today, obviously given the pandemic that's happening, there may be people that, I know you guys are opening up sort of in a limited way soon, but there may be people that don't feel comfortable going to a physical physio yet or can't.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, are there any warning signs that maybe they should prioritise getting to a physio to look out for? Is there anything?
Yes, definitely. So in the first few weeks after having a baby, it is normal to leak urine a little. Yeah. So you guys would know that, right? So we're not really panicking too much if in hospital you've leaked some urine. But we are starting to get concerned closer to that 6-week mark if you're not noticing that the urinary leaking is starting to improve naturally.
Yeah.
If there's been any fecal incontinence, I would go,
warning bells.
Get help now, because whilst that will definitely improve as well as the urinary incontinence, it's just one of those ones that you don't want to waste any time with. And get, the sooner we get onto the rehabilitation of the anal sphincters, the better. And then aside from that, in the early days, the other warning signs would be if you are noticing that your bladder's just not functioning as well. So that's a little bit less dependent on the pelvic floor, and I'm more thinking about the bladder, which I didn't talk much about the other day. But what can happen in those first few weeks is you lose the sense of urgency from your bladder. And so we are, and midwife, like Felicity, you would remember, you're having to remind women actually to go to the toilet more often. So if you're not noticing that sense of urgency is starting to return to some sort of normal, which is about every 3 hours, that's another warning sign. And then the only other thing would be if you haven't got your constipation under control and you need some help with that, that's vital, because the more you're straining to open your bowels, the more potential you are damaging your pelvic floor.
So, can I just ask one question on the back of that as well? If somebody knows their pelvic floor is not okay, but they're really, really desperate to start back to exercise and probably some high impact stuff before the 6 weeks, what would you recommend there? Not even before the 6 weeks, if they just know they're not.
So, well, in the best case scenario, Janine, I suppose they could come and see a physio, and then get them going on their pelvic floor exercises and make sure that prescription is optimal for them, exactly what they need to do. And then we would talk to them about fitting a pessary. So a pessary being like a splint that can sit vaginally. Once it's fitted vaginally, it just supports all of your organs. Right. So bladder, uterus, rectum. The symptom I forgot to talk about, sorry, Jen, is the other warning sign would be if there's a symptom of heaviness through your centre. So you're walking around, you just get this sense of heaviness in your pelvis. Again, really very normal in those first 6 weeks. But if you're not noticing that heaviness is getting less over that time, I wouldn't... I'd get on with seeing someone sooner rather than later.
You probably would avoid running if you kind of had that sensation going on.
100%. Yeah. And you're noticing the things that make that heaviness worse. Yeah. So you're like, ooh, I had the carrier on for an hour today, which is a half an hour more than I would normally, and now I feel heavy. That's too much load. Yeah. Okay. So that's a common example. So back to yours, Janine, just what we would do is, again, assess the variables, and we'd say, listen, we can actually support these organs and protect them from any descent whilst your pelvic floor is slowly rebuilding. And that will allow you to do the exercise that you're telling us you're desperate to do.
Right. Thank you.
So I think a good message is that there are things that can be done, and it's not something that you need to just, oh my God, I can't talk about this. You know, the earlier you get in, the better. So
absolutely. And I guess if there is scope for you to see a physio before you do return to exercise, regardless of symptoms, then that's not a bad idea to consider. And if that just means that we assess all the elements we want to and say, you're amazing, go for it, then
at least you know.
At least you know, as opposed to, I guess, seeing us in 6 months down the track with symptoms that maybe we potentially could have avoided if we were a little bit more proactive.
Well, that's fantastic. It was so good to have you, Jo, in the group on Tuesday. We would love to have you back. Everybody found it was really useful, and thank you so much for doing this summary so that we can share that with the people that weren't there. And we'd love to have you back again. So thank you so much for your time.
It's fun. Love to be back.
Thanks so much, Jo.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay.